Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to today's webinar. It is an absolute thrill to welcome you to the discussion, 4 Ways AI-Powered Virtual Agents Automate the Contact Center. It's brought to you by CCW Digital and SmartAction. I'm Brian Cantor, Principal Analyst for CCW Digital, and your host for today's discussion. So it's interesting. Within the contact center community, if you read any articles, you go to any conferences or watch any webinars, you generally see automation and self-service being treated as this unbelievably hot and groundbreaking topic. But the reality is that we've had self-service tools for decades. We've had opportunities to automate aspects of the customer experience. I mean, we all know the IVR. But the issue is that the IVR is so limited in its automation capabilities. It can't do everything, and even what it can do, it doesn't do very well. And so since it lacks that robust power of some of our more modern tools, it's ultimately a very limited option for customers. And so knowing these limitations, being aware of how it's not getting the job done, we in contact center leadership may try our best to route customers to the IVR, but we know the reality. We know that we're going to have to rely on live agents for even the most simple, repetitive tasks. It's long been costly for us, and frankly, it's been time-consuming and problematic for customers as well. Luckily, things are finally changing. And that's why automation has taken on a new life as a hot topic, because thanks to the rise of conversational AI and cloud-based delivery, we're able to break through these unfortunate shackles of the traditional IVR. We're not simply going to be automating more conversations, we're going to make these conversations better. They're actually going to add value for the customer and not just be deflection tools. Now, one vendor leading the way on this topic is SmartAction, and their CEO, as you see on the screen right now, is Tom Lewis, who over the course of today's discussion is going to be sharing examples detailing the 4 ways companies are actually using AI-powered virtual agents in very practical ways. Now, just a little bit about Tom. Before he was a CEO at SmartAction, he was a partner at Deloitte Consulting. He led their customer service advisory practice for 13 years, and that put him face-to-face with guiding Fortune 500 clients on their contact center strategy and technology, operations, customer experience. If it's within the realm of customer contact, he was advising big players on it. I'm so thrilled to be chatting with him today. Tom, how is everything?
Thanks a bunch, Brian. Glad to be here. Looking forward to this.
Absolutely. We're thrilled to have you here, thrilled to have your insights and those practical examples that I promised a few moments ago. Now, as a reminder for those watching, we are going to keep things to a very brisk and tight 30 minutes, but we still want to try to get to as many of your questions as we can. Submit those using the console on your screen, and we'll try to save time at the end to answer those. Anything we can't answer, I can promise you, Tom and some of our other team here will be sure to get back to you after the fact, because we know how important this is to you, and it's important to us, and we want to provide that guidance. Without further ado, I want to give Tom the chance to just provide a little bit of context about SmartAction and why this topic is so important to you.
Yeah, thanks, Brian. And I'll give you the quick version because I know we want to get to the content. So, SmartAction started as an AI research company back in 2002. So we're not new to this, not new kids on the blocks when it comes to AI development, machine learning, and natural language processing. And where we fit is with companies who already are using the contact center platform or IVRs, as you've been talking about, and it might be Genesys or Avaya, Nice inContact, and so forth. And so they lean on us to expand those platforms' self-service capabilities in those environments. So as far as street cred goes, I think if you looked at Gartner, they named us the cool vendor in 2017. Last year, Frost & Sullivan named us a leader in AI self-service. And if you want to dive even deeper and look at some of the reviews on Gartner Peer Insights, which come from our customers directly and other competitors' customers, I think what you'll find is that we're the top-rated, most viewed virtual customer assistant solution among the likes of IBM, Watson, et cetera.
Well, Tom, thank you so much for that context. And yeah, I've had the chance to work with SmartAction in a variety of capacities, and I can confirm that this is a company that's not only passionate about the technology, but really understanding the customer service strategy that goes behind it. They have amazing technology and a lot of innovation, but they're thinking about it within the context of what really matters to customers, businesses, and agents, and that's what's so refreshing. And so thanks, Tom, for all you've been able to contribute so far and in terms of this industry, and obviously I'm excited for what new innovation you're going to continue sharing with us. So moving into that discussion, right now you see on the screen we have a diagram, and what we're referring to is basically as yesterday's contact center. You essentially want to look at it as what was happening before we were really taking advantage of AI, before we really had the full strength of cloud technology behind us. And now when we move on to this look of today's contact center, we can see that one of the biggest changes, one of the biggest transformations is this idea of artificial intelligence powered virtual agents. So in the past, when we were talking about automation, as I alluded to in my intro, it was very limited. It was kind of, simple, touch tone automation or very specifically directed dialogue from the IVR. And essentially anything that could not contain or handle was going to move into the pool of live human agents. Well, now we have an alternative to that. We have a pool of virtual agents who can automate some of these calls and chats that were handled by a live agent and do so in a very natural and refreshing way for customers. Now, obviously, we're going to spend a lot of time diving into the AI technology and what it looks like and why it's so impressive. But one of the things I want to start with that's really special here is the delivery. Can you walk us through that delivery mechanism, Tom?
Yeah, sure, Brian. And the idea is very simple, that we are a cloud-based platform. And that may not be that big a deal in today's world, but what it means is that we can integrate into any, and I do mean any, telephony architecture without requiring any hardware on our customer's side, nothing additional. So nothing changes except that instead of routing some of the calls to live agents, you're now routing the calls to virtual agents, where they either complete the call or transfer it to a live agent with a screen pop of all the gathered data so that the human can pick up the call from there.
Now, it's great if you have the right delivery mechanism, but again, you have to have the right voice automation behind it. And, it's been around for a while, and up until recently, it really wasn't very good. I mean, I mentioned some of the IVR, but we were even upset with Siri. People constantly mocked things like Siri and even Alexa about, what they were delivering and how it wasn't very natural engaging with them.
Yeah, and I think people really hated IVRs too, and maybe they still do. But now, it's somewhat not as true as it was in the past in a pretty short period of time. Everyone's accustomed to the voice-to-machine interface on their phone and their home, and now they expect it from their contact center. And they expect it to be just as good as those environments. And now that speech recognition has gotten so good, it's opened up pretty much a new world of cognitive capability to do something intelligent with what the system heard.
So I think when you moderate a webinar on artificial intelligence and automation in the contact center, you're contractually obligated to ask, what does this mean for live agents? Are they going to be replaced by these virtual agents as the technology becomes more robust? What does that outlook look like moving forward?
Yeah, I don't know that the agents are going anywhere anytime soon, but think of it this way. The emergence of virtual agents are allowing humans to do what they do best, like complex critical thinking, empathy, persuasion, those sorts of things. And so the call types and chats getting automated right now are the ones that are routine in nature, or at least more so. And it just so happens that the majority of call types in most contact centers are repetitive, at least, and probably routine for that matter. And there's nothing new in that. Part of the approach, to all of that is the same, but the CX, the customer experience, is better, and that certainly the price point is lower, which means that the call centers can actually do it now instead of just talking about it. And we have many customers who offload more than half of their calls and chat volume with virtual agents.
You just said over half, right? That's a really big number, and I think that's really exactly what you said. That's putting your money where your mouth is. That's walking the talk, because that's not just saying, we're going to dabble in it. We're going to this is about really committing to the idea of leveraging virtual agents. That said, I'd imagine that might be some of the more mature cases you're working with. Is that where customers actually get started?
Yeah, not necessarily. In fact, I often use the expression, it's a journey, not a destination. And so most customers do start small. I can say that our customers, we allow them to do it that way because they can start small, sort of kick the tires and prove out the success, and then expand to other call types or chats. And it's a low risk approach, again, part of this journey. So a good example of that would be from the world's largest pizza chain. We're working with them right now to automate what they call rapid reorders. So in other words, allowing returning customers to order the same thing they did the last time they called. And it turns out a lot of customers simply reorder the same pizza every time. I guess that makes sense. I mean, I personally do that. I only like pepperoni pizza. But all custom food orders go to live agents now. And so you can imagine that the next phase will be to handle their daily specials. And after the specials, the roadmap is to handle some food orders and so forth and so on. So almost all of our customers follow this walk, crawl, run, or this journey that I'm talking about.
That makes perfect sense. So really what you're recommending is that, not every company, it makes sense to kind of take this big bang or this wholesale implementation from the get-go. The real key here is to think strategically about your customer experience, about your agents, about real gaps in how you're connecting with customers, and kind of start from there when you look at where automation might make the biggest impact.
Yeah, I think that's right. And we do have big bang implementations, but it's not the norm. And so the key collaboration for us that we do with our clients is identifying that point to start. Figure out the 2 to 3 call types or chats that are most obvious candidates for AI automation and is going to deliver that immediate ROI.
Now, just for the sake of the audience, I want to get a sense of what you're defining as the most obvious call types or chats. I mean, I know that, a lot of times we throw words out there like simple versus complex or transactional versus strategic, but I'm wondering if you could walk through kind of when you say the most obvious interactions, what you're really referring to.
I think by most obvious, I mean that call types where the live agent almost feels like a robot doing the job anyway. It's generally not requiring complex thinking or troubleshooting. Office Depot, as an example, has a straightforward return process. They're not using virtual agents for everything, but they've identified returns as the best place to start with virtual agents. So the ROI is a no-brainer, and the customer experience in that lane is as good as a live agent.
Now, when we talk about this area, when you look at the impact of AI in the contact center, I think it's important to not set the bar too low. Like, I completely agree with you. I think many people out there will agree that you definitely want to start with some simple, straightforward call types and chats. But I know the technology is certainly capable of doing this, and you, in fact, have a lot of clients, as an example, who are really starting to use AI-powered virtual agents to work on some very complex, some multi-dimensional conversations that really do have a meaningful role within the customer journey. I know AAA is one of the examples of a company you work with.
Yeah, and this is where the real power of AI is being realized. AAA uses our virtual agents to automate the entirety of the emergency roadside assistance call. And so as you can imagine, that's a complex process. It means that a natural language greeting to capture one of the several open-ended intents as to why they might be calling. And then we finding their location using GPS, dispatching the tow, checking the location and so forth. And so we're going through this long process with them.
Now, I know that you're also at the point where you're doing complex things with one of the biggest insurance companies in the world. Can you detail what that looks like?
Yeah, they use virtual agents in their body shops who are doing work on damaged vehicles. This is primarily around windshield replacement, but the body shop calls in to find out what's covered on a policy and get authorized to do the work. The system does the entirety of that authorization, and it's a conversation where the happy path has 17 back and forth turns between the caller and the system. So each turn presents essentially a fork to a different outcome depending upon the answer given by the body shop and how that matches against the data in the customer record. So one of the most difficult pieces is capturing long alphanumeric sequences as fast as the caller can say them. That's hard even for a human to get it right all the time, and it's not really possible with touchtone. So an AI-powered virtual agent can do the whole call in about 3 minutes, the same time as the live agent, and as you can imagine, about 1/10 of the cost.
Now, I love those examples. I think both the AAA example, the insurance example, really show how AI can make a meaningful impact on the customer experience. But I'd imagine some of those listening right now might be wondering, hey, I've seen some chatbots in practice and they're not doing all that you described. So when you're talking about the virtual agents that are really empowering these huge customer experience improvements, I'm wondering if you can provide kind of a definition of what that is and maybe how it's different than what some people may think of when they think of kind of AI in the contact center.
Sure. And if you're thinking about just a traditional chatbot, I don't think we're really talking about that. What we're talking about is a cloud-based AI brain that is connected to the same data as the live agents are seeing, has the ability to read the record off that data just like your live agents, has the ability to recognize natural language and extract the intent over the phone or chat or text and navigate these multi-turn conversations I was talking about, and even predict why somebody was calling.
So you're basically empowering this virtual agent with everything that a live agent would typically have to perform in the contact center.
Yeah, well, except with the confines of these defined business rules that act as what we call guardrails for the virtual agent. So it stays in the lane where it knows what it's doing and how it will provide this great CX as the live agent. And the best part is that you only need to train the virtual agent once and then deploy it to all these various channels of voice, chat, and text.
Now, I got to ask you about those guardrails that you're talking about, because that comes up a lot. I think when people, they get excited about automation, but then one of their key questions is, what happens if the call goes in an unpredictable direction? If it veers outside those guardrails or outside that lane, what happens at that point?
If you think about it, even call center agents essentially have the rules and engagement and guardrails that they have within their call center. So it's not that atypical. But if it happens in the AI agent environment, then the call is merely routed to a live agent with a screen pop of the data to pick up where the virtual agent left off. And at least at that point, you've saved some of the handle time and avoided the customer frustration so that they don't have to repeat themselves.
Yep, and so that's some great context, Tom. Virtual agents can make a huge impact right now. AI is empowering our tools to truly transform the way we engage with customers. And I really want to dive deep into specifically some of the 4 ways that we're really revolutionizing the customer experience. We're going to take some time, Tom, to go through all 4 of these ways. But I want to start with the idea of natural language intent capture and maybe some examples of who might be using this right now.
Sure. So one of the benefits of the AI-powered virtual agent is that you have natural language processing technology at your disposal. And all of our prompts, even the yes, no's, assume that there's natural language and something else somebody might say. And that means understanding intent from an open-ended question instead of making the caller sit there and listen to a long list of single-word commands or buttons to press, and so forth. So a good example of this is one of the largest hospitality chains in Vegas. And they had so many places to route the calls that live agents had to do it. So they replaced some of the live agents answering the phone with an AI-powered virtual agent that simply asks, how can I help you today? And so depending upon the property, the solution needed to be capable of understanding the intent for upwards to 10 or 15 different endpoints before routing or taking the caller down to the next level of questions.
Now, there's a lot of different kind of customer intentions that you would want to be handling, because there's a lot of different ways, right? Someone may ask for something at a hotel, at a hospitality chain, and that's going to raise a question of what kind of data do you need to be able to prepare your virtual agent for this kind of rollout?
Well, in this case, and this is pretty typical, a few hundred live agent call recordings were needed for each endpoint. We looked at their training material, and that was enough data to identify the vernacular, build out the language acoustic model, and then tune the intent capture with the AI engine. We do all of that work. And then keep in mind, for each intent, we're going to be listening for hundreds of different things.
And is that sort of a typical process for most of your clients as they're getting started?
Well, yes and no. Our centralized natural language understanding engine already has thousands of grammars programmed into it. And since we support self-service across so many different industries and call types, it's rare for us to run into a call type we're not already supporting directly or indirectly. So in the casino example, there were some new things and we added them to the pie, if you will. It's usually just light customization or augmenting the pieces we don't already have that are unique to that customer, like in this case. And so every customer will have some uniqueness.
Now, you also, with AAA, you also do something that involves natural language intent capture. I'm wondering if you could walk us through that as well.
Well, at AAA, they're actually greeted by the club's own IVR system with a fairly traditional touch tone, press 1 for this, press 2 for that. And so if they choose roadside assistance through that IVR, then they're routed to our system where they might need help with any number of things.
And that's going to probably be those things on the fly. You might be thinking, say, your car needs a jump or you have a flat tire, the kind of things where you kind of want to get to your destination. You want to get the answer as quickly as possible.
Yeah, that's exactly right. And so if you were trying to do this with your IVR, you'd have to list out all of those things, all those possibilities to choose from. But we simply ask, how can we help you? And before we even ask that question, actually, we're already using their caller ID to pull up their membership to ensure that their account is active and they have enough credits or toes. So we know we're okay to go ahead and proceed with a call, that they're going to be able to get their car towed. So that's an example of guardrail I was referring to earlier.
Now, in this case, I'd imagine that it works a lot better when you're able to quickly authenticate the customer, and the system can say, hey, here's who this customer is, and we've been able to qualify them, and so we can proceed with actually resolving their issue. But what happens in those cases where maybe the system cannot match the caller ID to an actual account within the database?
Yeah, and the idea is to just do the same thing that the live agent does to authenticate them with the home address as maybe a backup to match the account. And then it's a good example of what we call our golden rule, which is however a live agent handles the call is how the virtual agent should handle it. And that guides a lot of our design.
So obviously, when you're able to have a virtual agent starting to think about intent, that goes a long way in making a more meaningful interaction for customers. But it also means that you may run into issues where you're trying to get very specific with the customer, and what happens when the virtual agent doesn't understand the intent, doesn't know what the customer is actually trying to achieve, kind of what happens at that point?
Well, at that point, we probably are going to suggest a handful of the common intents in a more directed dialogue fashion. I'm sorry, I didn't get that. Do you have a flat tire? Do you need to jump? That sort of thing. And so even though we're listening for more intents than that, we're making suggestions to the caller on how to act or interact with the system instead of just sort of giving up at that point.
But I mean, what if that doesn't get you to the intent? What if it doesn't exactly get you to what the customer is looking for? What happens at that point?
We really feel pretty strongly that we should at that point transfer it to a live agent and give them the screen pop, everything that we've gotten so far. We really want to protect that customer experience and make sure that the customer doesn't get frustrated.
Now, obviously, there are going to be some unique cases. There are going to be challenges where it's just an unpredictable, unexpected issue. And at that point, it sounds like you would transfer to a live agent. But are there any other barriers that might make it difficult to capture intent from particular customers?
Yeah, it's actually a complex technical problem. And I think there's three things that influence all this outside of what we've been talking about so far. One is accents of the caller. Another is background noise. And then finally, the limitations, frankly, of the audio quality of the United States phone system versus, say, a high-definition audio device like Amazon Alexa or even Siri on your phone. And so we have some great technical answers. I think we could dive into that at a later point on how we've addressed each one of those.
Now, I want to go back to the casino hotel answer from earlier. In a lot of these cases, it kind of sounds like when you're thinking about the virtual agent, you're looking at a lot of the use cases for the IVR. So I'm wondering, as our listeners out there think about whether this makes sense for their organization, should they be thinking of virtual agents as an IVR alternative as opposed to something else within the customer experience?
Yes and no. What I always say is if you're happy with your IVR as it stands today, keep it. And if you're still taking a lot of calls with live agents, however, then that's where the virtual agent automation can help. And so maybe an example, in textile fashion group, they've got some brands that you may have heard of like Fabletics, Shoe Dazzle, Just Fab. They have actually an in-contact IVR for the initial prompting and routing. It works great and it's economical, but then they send the calls to us for many of the activities that their agents were doing previously, so more of that complex stuff. And keep in mind, this is an AI-powered virtual agent, and in their case, the channel doesn't matter. So Textile is able to offer the same self-service experience in both voice and chat.
Well, that certainly walks us through that first example, and it's certainly a powerful one. I think when you can get to the point where you're able to engage with customers as people and accommodate natural language and conversation, you're going to go a long way in allowing automation tools to actually resolve real issues for customers and make them feel like your brand cares, really create the experience they're looking for. But that's just one of the ways that we're really looking to sort of elevate the contact center right here and really use automation AI to make voice stronger. Another area concerns front-end data gathering, and that's really the idea. That's an area that actually a lot of agents spend a lot of time. It's very repetitive. It requires a lot of effort from the customer. It makes the agent frustrated, and so it's a real pain point for a lot of customer experience functions. Now, I want to go back to something you mentioned earlier, which is basically how you're going to authenticate the customer and then kind of share a screen pop if, say, it turns out that the issue should be handled by a live agent instead of one of your virtual agents. So are there some top use cases that you have where, it does make sense to kind of use your tool to gather that data and then pass it along in the form of a screen pop to a live agent?
Yeah, I think you've captured that right. And so a good example is probably in healthcare, where authentication can take a large part of the average handle time, primarily due to the HIPAA compliance. And that means that companies have to sort of triangulate 3 different data points among, say, 6 to 8 that they might have in their database in order to make sure it's really the patient. And so in the case of JB Medical Supply, one of our clients, this was taking their live agents 3 minutes or more on average, and they brought in the virtual agents to handle the authentication before passing the call to the live agent, and were able to offload all of that time to the live agents, and frankly, made the job more interesting for the agents.
Yeah, and certainly when people think about authentication, they think about very highly regulated areas, healthcare, finance, where there's a lot of personal data and you need to make sure you get it right. But there are other use cases where you can really use automation for front-end data gathering. And one of those areas is actually you have a great case study with the second largest appliance manufacturer where you're doing things to expedite their experience process as well.
Yeah, that's part of that journey that this client took. And we capture customer name, product name, model number, serial number, data purchase, so forth. And so 6 months after we went live, actually, the client in this case presented at Execs in the Know conference in Santa Monica and showed that both the virtual agent and the live agent were doing the same task in about the same amount of time, but there was a major difference, which was about 1/10 of the cost. And so that was just the upfront data gathering part of the call, as you mentioned.
Yeah, and I mean, right there, you're looking at a huge efficiency benefit. And it's not just, again, the numerical efficiency, the time spent, the cost. It's that frustrating emotion that goes along with if you're the customer, you have to answer so many questions over and over again. That frustrating aspect for the agent where you have to keep asking the same question over and over again. So when you can get to the point where you're using AI to eliminate that process and yet maintain that same personal connection, get the data you need, you're surely on the path to a better customer experience. Now, I want to move into our third example here, which is really looking at, and this is probably the example everyone knows when you talk about AI, it's kind of the one that comes to mind most frequently, and that is essentially fully automating certain kinds of interactions. We talked about earlier in the conversation, Tom, those most obvious call types, the high volume, repetitive, those rote calls that come into the contact center over the phone or chat that perhaps don't need a live agent in all cases. So I'm hoping you can again share maybe some specific use cases to really identify what constitutes one of these obvious examples and where AI can streamline the process.
Sure. So a decent place to start is actually with that pizza example. And so when we greet the caller, we're triggering a system backend call to their database using the caller ID to pull up as much information about that customer as we can. And so one of the things we're looking for is to see if they've ordered pizza within the last 2 months. And if that's a yes, then we provide a very predictive and easy experience. We change the greeting knowing that there's a high probability that they want to order the same thing they ordered last time.
But even before you get to that point of offering the reorder, there's going to have to be some areas and some business rules that you're going to need to really identify with the data and make sure that you're hitting on these key requirements.
Yeah, and that's part of what makes this sort of repetitive but easy for the system to do. So we're looking for a combination of things. Like I said, had they ordered a pizza in the last 60 days, making sure that the price is within a tolerance range of what they ordered before, making sure the store they ordered from still is open or open at that time, previous orders are currently in stock, and that they're going to be able to deliver it. So those sorts of things to make sure before you even get started.
But I mean, what happens if it doesn't hit all those parameters?
Yeah, at the moment, again, part of that crawl, walk, run is that it gets transferred to a live agent. But if it meets those parameters, then it's fully contained within our system and within the virtual agent. And, a hot pizza pie is on the way to a happy customer.
Now, one of the things that I like to think about here is not just can the virtual agent do the work, but how does the experience actually compare with the experience a customer might have if they're dealing with a live agent handling a similar interaction? Any thoughts on that?
Yeah, so the key to doing this without sacrificing 1 ounce of customer experience is by identifying the scope properly for the virtual agents, where you know that it's going to perform as good or even better than a live agent. And the way you create those perfect lanes for a virtual agent is by having your customer data to define the business rules and guardrails.
And so I want to move into the fourth area, and that's really the idea of outbound calls or texts or interactions. It's funny because, again, when you talk about some of those long-standing areas of automation, certainly we're familiar with some sort of automated outbound outreach. And yet when you think about how complex interactions are getting, when you think about the opportunities you have when you engage with customers, a lot of those archaic outbound practices may not work anymore. So I'm wondering if you can kind of walk us through some of how you're using your technology to make the outbound experience a lot more productive and a lot more valuable for both the business and the customer.
Actually, a large part of our overall business is outbound. And I see that as an untapped opportunity in spite of what's going on with all the robocalls and so forth. We don't put ourselves in that bucket. But for many companies, it otherwise requires a lot of human effort. And so a great example is Penske Truck Rental. So they use agents as well as outbound robocalls and text reminders regarding reservations. The robocall process had a problem, and that is that it oftentimes the customer needed to change their reservation, and the robocall just couldn't deal with that, which meant that they had to hang up and then make another call back into the call center. It's not a great customer experience, expensive, et cetera. So by using the AI-powered virtual agent that's connected to their data, they can confirm the pickup, or they can reschedule it right there in that call, and they can get another time, location, vehicle. And that's a much better customer experience. In fact, we have a lot of customers who use this for scheduling. One of the largest automobile manufacturers uses our virtual agents for recalls and scheduling of service appointments.
Now, Tom, we are reaching the end of the discussion, and we are going to try to get in a question or two. But I wanted, before we get there, really look at why an organization may want to choose SmartAction for their AI-enhanced self-service. I think certainly there's going to be the technology advantage, but there's a lot of companies who, at least if you go on their website, are going to brag about how amazing their technology is. So certainly I'd like to learn what's different about you technologically, but also just as a business, your philosophy and why that makes sense for companies as they take on this AI automation journey.
Thanks. Sure. And I appreciate the question. And so when we ask our current clients why they choose us, it's invariably because we made it less hard than anyone to deploy the conversational AI automation. I could say that it was easy, but frankly, you and I have been around this space. We've all been around this space long enough. Creating a great customer experience with a machine is never easy. And so that's why we say we make it less hard for our clients' customers to self-serve, and less hard for our clients themselves to make the transition to automation. And that means they can start small, as we talked about earlier, with a low risk, very low upfront investment, while getting exactly what they need quickly. And since we built so many apps at this point across pretty much every industry, we rarely start from scratch. And with any client, all these building blocks are already there in our centralized AI core. And that means it's less hard to get started too. So another important point is that we don't sell or license our software. I think this is important. We provide all the customer experience design and ongoing management as a service through a team of world-class CX professionals. And when I say world-class, I mean world-class. We have the very best team in the world for this across several disciplines, and many of our clients have said so. We have one team that architects the initial CX design, and another team who handles ongoing monitoring and perfecting of the results. And so since this team does all the heavy lifting, nothing makes life less hard than that for our clients. And even though we started as an AI research company, and we definitely have received the awards and recognition around our AI and our technology, we think about ourselves in terms of being more of a CX company than an AI or a technology company.
Now, that certainly makes a lot of sense. And again, as I alluded to when I started and I first introduced you, Tom, I think that passion for really thinking about the customer experience and creating technology that makes sense for that purpose, that has a clear sense of why, that's what makes SmartAction so valuable. And I know that, certainly that you want to provide organizations an opportunity to really understand what makes you different and what makes you valuable. And so a lot tend to start by sort of working with you on sort of a demo or an AI readiness assessment. Now, I'm sure most out there know what a demo would entail, but I'm wondering if you could clear up what an AI readiness assessment looks like.
Yeah, so it's simply sitting down with the prospect and to discover which types of calls or chats in the environment are perfect for AI automation, and then outline a business case and what that means for your business from an ROI as well as CX perspective. And that process is very consultative. When we examine the call types and the data, we're looking for where the virtual agent can provide the effortless experience for your customers and return that strong ROI. We're really trying to solve the business problem. And if they're interested in doing that, they should contact us. We'd love to talk to them.
Well, definitely, Tom. And I know we did really go really long with today's discussion, but, I don't feel too guilty about it because I think you shared so many great examples. And when you're talking about AI topics, I think, again, it's easy to say, here's all the amazing stuff it can do. It's easy to spout off those cliches about kind of handling simple tasks and augmenting agent performance. But you gave a variety of different use cases across industries, and I think that was really valuable. And so we don't have time for questions right now, and there's a lot that came in. But I know your passion for this space, and I'm sure you're going to be very happy to follow up with people who submitted those after we conclude today.
I would love to have a deep dive discussion when it's appropriate.
Definitely. And so on behalf of CCW Digital, on behalf of SmartAction, thanks to everyone who attended, who shared their questions, who declared their resounding commitment to using AI to elevate the voice experience, to elevate the overall contact center experience, and to make more meaningful, more valuable, more productive connections with your customers.